publicly confessing my mistake. I let my affair come over whenever my husband left for work. I am here to confess my mistake, and I am now learning my lesson, and I have learned that cheating can never lead to something good. I was letting my affair partner come over to my house after my husband left for work, and at the end of the day, my affair partner started stealing from me and also tried to set up his sister with my husband. I cannot believe that my affair partner will secretly set up his sister with my husband and make her take my place. And now my husband and I are about to get a divorce. That is because he is accusing me of stealing the valuable stuff in the house, and he is also seeing my affair partner's sister now. He also knows that I've been letting my affair partner into the house. My name is Martha, and I am a 26 years old housewife. The name of my husband is Edward, and he is 45 years old. He is a businessman, and Edward and I got married because our families were very close and they thought we were the perfect couple. Edward took me out on a couple of dates before he had me to be his girlfriend. Our relationship grew, and a few months later, we got married. Edward didn't allow me to work because his family had thought that I couldn't have time for the house if I was working, and so that's how I became a housewife. I didn't have any particular work that I was doing at that time, so it was easy for me to follow his lead. His family was emphasizing on us having children early, but I didn't give it any thought because I wasn't ready. But since Edward was in his 40s, they thought it was time he had children. I was always alone in the house all by myself, and I got used to it. As time went on, I became bored staying at home, and I wanted some sort of entertainment. I found that entertainment in Drake. I ran into Drake at the farmer's market one day, and since then we have been seeing each other. Drake and I got to know each other so well. I found out that we had a lot in common. He was my escape from all the boredom I was feeling alone in the house. He was a very funny person. He always made me laugh anytime I was feeling bored. My husband was not always around. He was always on one business trip or the other. I actually got used to it, but as a young woman, I needed a man that was close to my age, who could understand what I wanted. I needed a young man, and Drake was the one. Drake took it upon himself to do everything for me. It was the little things that he did that made me fall for him. He could open the door for me. He could help me around the house. Overall, he was doing things that my husband was not doing for me. Edward was old, and moreover, he was always on a trip or the other. Few weeks after I met Drake, he took me out on a date. We bonded a lot, and we had a lot in common. Drake was a very attentive person. He noticed the little things. And most of all, he was my age, so he understood me well. Drake didn't tell me what he did for a living, and I never understood why. I should have known better that he was a scam. He always used to tell me he had problems with his credit card, and I mostly paid for what we usually ate. I never saw it as something bad until now. Drake and I continued seeing each other for some months, and since my husband was not always around, he didn't notice, and I was happy about it because I saw something that was keeping me busy after a long time. I was always inviting Drake over to my house for us to spend quality time together. I never liked being seen in public because my husband knew a lot of people and I was afraid I could run into them. And so I avoided public places and settled for my house. In my house, Drake and I were trying new things. He taught me how to dance. I have always wanted to dance. He taught me a lot about his likes and dislikes. Drake could come over and I could prepare food for him. We could watch movies, have fun, and be happy. It went on for a while, and by that time, Drake and I started dating. We dated for a while, and he introduced me to his sister, Dora. Dora was very nice to me, and I liked her. I thought Dora was so much like me, but more bold. She could do anything she wanted, and I was jealous. Dora took me out shopping a couple of times, and she got me clothes that, according to her, I should be wearing. She boosted my self-confidence because I thought I didn't have a good body. But I didn't know all this had been done in order for me to warm up to them and for them to exploit me. They often come over to my house sometimes, and we do a lot of fun activities together. We played games and watched movies together. I often cuddle up with Drake, and Dora could always say we were such a cute couple. I could always blush because I had her approval, and it meant a lot to me. I didn't know that whenever Drake came over to my place, he was stealing something from my home. Drake was secretly doing things behind my back, and I was not aware. My husband got back from one of his numerous trips one day, and I was in the kitchen preparing food for him when he called for me. I was thinking it was just one of those days where he didn't know where he kept his watch. I went to meet him in the living room, and he told me he could not find the cash he dropped in his drawer. I told him I didn't see any money. Maybe he had spent it and he forgot. But he insisted he had dropped money there. I ended up convincing him he didn't drop any money there because if there was, I could have seen it. He ate his breakfast and promised to return early from work today, saying he was taking me out. I had plans with Drake and I had to cancel because anytime Edward was around, we don't usually see each other at all in order to avoid being caught. I did some house chores, and before I knew it, it was time for me to prepare for the dinner Edward was taking me to. I got dressed and we left. Edward always tried his best for me, and I always felt like it was never enough. Used to think that he didn't understand me because we weren't in the same age bracket. We ate dinner and he told me he was going to be around for the next couple of weeks. He had said that he had some time to spare before his next trip. I was very sad about it because I knew I was not going to see Drake for a long time. I faked being happy in order for him not to suspect that I wasn't happy. In the period that Edward was around, we visited our family members, mostly Edward's. He was very close to them. I didn't like them because anytime they saw me, they were always talking about me having children. Don't get me wrong, I wanted children, but not now. Edward was always on work trips, and I didn't want to raise children all by myself. But they didn't understand that, so I normally stayed far away from them. I was only close to Edward's mother, Edna. Edna was like a mother to me. She was part of the reason why I got married to Edward. She has these motherly hugs and care she usually gives me. It makes me feel at home, and she usually makes food and sends them to me once in a while. Whenever I needed someone to talk to, she was there. Edna was a blessing to me because I felt like she even liked me more than her own son. Whenever Edward and I had problems, she could be on my side, and I always appreciated her for it. Edward didn't stay for long before he was called for a trip and he left. I was very happy the morning he left, and I went straight to call Drake to come over. Drake and I had a good time. I even went on a spa date with Dora. We went to the beach. I was back to being fully happy again. There were days that I drank and slept over at my house. We decided to leave for a weekend getaway a few days after Edward left. We went to a town where nobody knew us, and so we were free to do whatever. We got back home, and it was not long when Edward came back from his trip. Once again, he discovered that things were missing in the house which I didn't notice. I also discovered that my set of jewelries were also missing, but I didn't know how to explain it to Edward. He accused me of stealing from him. I was shocked because he was accusing me of something I didn't do. I could steal from my own house again. It went on for a while, and it was becoming too much. I spoke to Drake about it so that he could help me find solutions to the problem and how we could get who was stealing from us. He told me that I shouldn't drop my keys under the doormat again, and that I should be giving it to him in order for him to keep things safe in the house. I didn't know I was giving the key to my house to the thief himself. Whenever my husband was around, Dora could come over and we could talk sometimes. We did things together, and I didn't know that she had eyes for my husband. She could come over with clothes that were too revealing, and I never saw it as anything for a day. Looking back on it, I wished I had said something to her or stopped her from coming to the house. She could move around in front of my husband, serve him food, and do things for him. I thought she was just caring. Unknown to me that she had already made plans with her brother in order for them to snatch my husband away from me because they thought he had money, and I was in their way of getting it. Drake and Dora hatched their plan well, and I let them into my house. Dora got close to my husband, and I didn't know until it was too late. At that point, Dora was already seeing my husband secretly. He was giving her money and buying her gifts, things he didn't buy for me. He took her on different trips, and I didn't know. Unknown to me, I was still in a relationship with her brother. Drake and I continued to see each other, and whenever I was with Drake, Dora was with my husband. It went on for a while. Whenever my husband comes back from those trips, he was always angry with me for doing one thing or the other. We usually fight a lot since he started seeing Dora. I didn't know that Dora was instigating my husband against me. Drake could steal things from my house, and my husband could blame me, saying I was the thief. I didn't know that my husband had taken my house problem to Dora to discuss. Dora had told him I was the one stealing those items and using the money for my personal benefits. My husband could come home and start saying all manner of things to me. I was very confused, and there were days I could cry myself to sleep. After some time, the stealing stopped, and I didn't know it stopped because Edward was around and I was not letting Drake into my house. Edward and I were not particularly on good terms. We went about our normal lives for some time, and I found out that Edward had changed in a lot of ways. He was not paying attention to me like usual. I knew we weren't that cuddly couple, but I knew something wasn't right. He went out at night and stayed up late. He comes back home drunk, and sometimes he doesn't come at all. He made late-night calls, and that got me really worried. I decided to follow him one day in order for me to find out what was going on. I saw him entering a restaurant with a woman, but when I confronted him about it, he told me it was just a business partner he took to lunch to thank her for work. And I didn't believe him because I knew Edward, he didn't know how to lie. I talked to Drake and Dora about what was going on with Edward, and they told me to not think too much into it, that it might just be nothing. They made me believe something was wrong with me, and I should stop thinking about what wasn't there. Unknown to me, they were the ones doing everything. My relationship with Drake continued, and I always felt at peace with him. And I was thinking we should move to the next stage because I saw him as a genuine person who loved me. But every time I brought it up, he could find something to say that it wasn't the right time, and that when the time was right, it could happen. I believed him because I thought he needed time. But I was wrong. Few days after Drake left my house came back and started complaining again. But this time I was tired, and I decided to install cameras in my house without anyone knowing. I didn't tell Drake because I knew he could talk me out of it. So I installed cameras and waited for who was stealing from me to strike again. The first day, I didn't see anything, and I kept waiting, but no one suspicious came into the house. It took time for me to discover that Drake was the one stealing from me. I caught Drake on the camera taking something from my husband's drawer and putting it in his pocket. I didn't want to believe it. I felt used. I started crying because I allowed a thief into my house and I thought he was a saint. I even went to him with my problems in order for him to help me. Unknown to me that my enemies were very close. I never for once suspected that it was Drake that was stealing from me. I didn't know how I was going to explain to my husband that it was my affair that was stealing from us all this while. How was I going to explain it? After a few days of ignoring Drake's call, I finally made up my mind to speak to him. I decided was not to allow a thief into my house again. I met up with him at a cafe. I showed him the video and he didn't deny it. I was very surprised. I threatened to report him to the police for stealing from me, but he said if I did, he was going to expose me to my husband, and I didn't want that. Drake wasn't the man I met a few months back. He had totally changed the man I spent a lot of my time with, and couldn't have threatened me that way. He said he had videos he was going to send to my husband if I didn't let him go. I cried out of the cafe and I never looked back. I got home and I saw a message from Drake threatening me to do exactly what he wanted. He extorted me a great deal. He asked me to take money from my husband, which I did. I was seriously blackmailed by the person I thought was my supposed affair. I gave Drake a lot of money, and countless times I had explained to him that it could be a problem if my husband found out, but he didn't listen to me. After countless extortions from Drake, my husband finally found out that his money was missing. He called me and asked him what I had been doing with the huge amount of money I was taking. I didn't know how to explain to him that I was being blackmailed by the man I had an affair with, because I knew it would end my marriage. Since I didn't have a good explanation for the money, my husband decided to report to our family members that I was a thief and that I had been stealing from the house. I had to explain to them that I used the money to buy some personal stuff, so I was able to buy myself some time. They didn't ask me further, and I was glad. A few weeks later, I saw my husband with Dora in a restaurant holding hands intimately. It was then I became aware that it had been their plan to destroy my marriage. I couldn't go straight and confront them because I was also guilty, and if exposed, it could ruin my marriage. I met up with Dora to stop seeing my husband, but she refused. These people were out to destroy me, and I was the one that bought them. I discovered that all along it was Dora that my husband had been seeing secretly. I should have known better. It all made sense now. A few days later, I was doing everything within my power to keep things away from my husband. But since he was with Dora, I was always afraid he was going to find out one way or the other. Drake didn't leave me alone. He kept on taking money from me, and I didn't know what to do. They claimed they had a video of me and Drake together, and they threatened to show my husband. At some point, I had to stop giving Drake money. My husband had cleared out the money that was in the account. I became helpless, and Drake kept on blackmailing me. But at that point, I was tired, and I didn't have any more money to give again. I began selling out all the valuable things I had, but it wasn't enough. Dora finally exposed me to my husband after I refused to give them money. My husband was very angry at me. He found out that I was cheating on him with someone. I had to explain to him that I was set up by these people, but he didn't believe me because Dora had already fed him with enough lies about me. I kept begging Edward to listen to me that I was set up, but he didn't hear me. My husband kept on talking about what I did, but he was still the one in a relationship with Dora. I didn't see the difference, but then again, I was fooled by them. So I knew he was also being fooled, and I tried to open his eyes to see the reality, but I wasn't heard. My husband asked me to pack out of the house because I cheated on him, and at that point, everything came crashing down on me. I was going to be homeless, I didn't have money, and I had sold my valuables to get money for Drake. I didn't know where to go. I got to my mother's old house hoping that Edward had a change of heart somehow. But it never happened. I went to his parents' house in order for them to speak to Edward to forgive me. But they turned me away, calling me all sorts of names and how I was a thief who had been stealing and cheating on their son. Few days later, I was given divorce papers that were already signed by Edward. I cried my eyes out because I had lost something good I had. I lost my marriage. I was looking for something that wasn't going to last. Now I have lost my husband to Dora and Drake. I shouldn't have cheated on Edward. He was everything a woman should want, but I was being greedy instead of me. To make my marriage work, I went after someone who was finally my downfall. Update. Hello guys, so right now my husband and I finalized the divorce. He made sure to painfully drag things out. He left me without a penny. I was fine with that because honestly, it was never about the money with me. I tried to explain to him the kind of person Dora and her brother were, but he never listened. I regretted what I did back then. I shouldn't have cheated on my husband. I even brought my affair partner to my house, which was very wrong. I started working at a restaurant as a waitress now because what had happened taught me a lesson that I needed to have my own money. And most importantly, I am depending on myself now. It wasn't easy, but I was trying my best. A few weeks ago, I heard that Dora and Drake ran away with money belonging to Edward. I felt pity for him only because I was human. I did warn him about them, but he didn't listen. He always said I was jealous. Right now, I made some friends who were showing me to the right path in life, and I am so happy to have them. I am always glad anytime I remember that I never gave in to the pressure of having children with Edward, because it could have been so much more complicated with children. A few days back, I went to Edward's place to check up on him, because I also heard he was in a very bad place. And when I got there, he chased me out, blaming me for being the reason for his problems. I understood where he was coming from. I was the one that brought Dora and Drake into our family, and they destroyed us beyond repair. Looking back, I know I disappointed a lot of people, especially Edna, Edward's mother. When she found out, she was very devastated. I couldn't look her in the face anymore. She was everything one could want in a mother, and the fact that she took me as her daughter and I did this to her makes what I did 1,000,000 times worse. Right now, she isn't talking to me and I can't even reach her anymore. She has distanced herself from me ever since. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret what I did because I hurt the people who I loved and also the people who loved me. The relationship I thought was gold and I was running after turned out to be dust. Drake never liked me. He carefully planned to milk me of my husband's money. He never loved me. Dora was just like her brother. She wasn't genuine like I thought. Everything they did, said to me was calculated, and I was a fool for falling into their trap. I should have known better.